Admiral Zektar stood before the massive view screen in his command center. The screen showed images that made no sense. Ships that looked like they were built by children playing with spare parts. Ships that should not fly, should not fight, and definitely should not win battles. But they were winning. The Galactic Empire had ruled space for over 5,000 years. 847 different alien species worked together under strict rules. Every ship followed the same designs. Warships looked like sharp crystals, fast and deadly. Cargo ships were big metal boxes, simple and strong. Explorer ships were perfect spheres covered in sensors. This was the way things had always been. This was the way things should always be. Zektar's green skin turned darker as he watched the recordings again. The strange ships moved in ways that hurt his eyes. They had parts sticking out everywhere. Some had engines that glowed different colors. Others had weapons bolted on the outside. One ship looked like someone had stuck 3 different ships together with metal plates. "Sir," said his aide, a young Thorian with blue scales. "The council is asking for your report." Zektar touched a button on his desk. The view screen changed to show the faces of the council members. 12 different alien species stared at him from their home worlds. "Admiral," said Counselor Vex, her tentacles waving slowly, "what do you make of these things?" Zektar cleared his throat. "The ships appear to be operated by bipedal creatures. They match old records from our databases." "What records?" asked Counselor Thane, his rocky face showing confusion. Zektar pulled up the ancient files. "Humans. Banished from our space 3,000 years ago. The records say they refused to follow proper ship designs. They kept changing things, adding parts, making modifications. The council called them dangerous." The room fell silent. Every council member knew the story. Humans had been loud, messy, and impossible to control. They built ships that looked wrong but somehow worked. They painted their ships bright colors. They gave their ships names instead of numbers. They even put plants inside their ships. "Impossible," said Counselor Vex. "Humans could not survive without our technology. They had no proper shipyards. No standard designs. They should have died out centuries ago." Zektar nodded. "That's what we all thought. But these ships, they fight like human ships used to fight. Wild, unpredictable, and they're winning against our patrol fleets." He played another recording. A human ship faced 3 Imperial cruisers. The human ship was ugly, covered in mismatched armor and strange weapons. It should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, the human ship did something impossible. Parts of it moved. Sections rotated. Weapons folded out from hidden spots. In 30 seconds, it had changed from a cargo ship into a warship. The Imperial cruisers, built for one purpose only, could not adapt. The human ship picked them off one by one. "By the 7 moons," whispered Counselor Thane. "How is that possible?" "Our engineers say it should not be possible," Zektar replied. "The stress on the ship's frame should tear it apart. The power systems should overload. But somehow it works." Counselor Vex's tentacles curled in anger. "They're still the same chaotic creatures they always were. This proves they have not learned proper civilization." "With respect," said Zektar carefully, "they seem to have learned something we have not." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Several members spoke at once, their words mixing into noise. Zektar waited for them to calm down. "Sir," his aide whispered. "There's more." Zektar looked at the new reports on his desk. His eyes grew wide. "Council members, please. There is something else you need to know." The voices stopped. Everyone stared at him. "Our scouts report that there are not just a few human ships. There are thousands, maybe millions. They have built an entire civilization in the outer rim of the galaxy." The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke. "How many thousands?" Zektar looked at the numbers again, hoping he had read them wrong. "Our best estimate is over 10 million ships, and that's just what we can see. 10 million ships of that design." Counselor Thane's voice was barely a whisper. "Each one different," Zektar confirmed. "No 2 ships look the same. Some are massive, built from old asteroids. Others are tiny, faster than our best fighters. Some look like they were built from the wrecks of our own ships." He paused, then added the part that worried him most. "And they're all moving toward our space." The council chamber fell silent again. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had been peaceful. Every species knew their place. Every ship followed the rules. Wars were rare because everyone used the same tactics, the same ships, the same strategies. But humans did not follow rules. They never had. What do they want? Asked Counselor Vex. We don't know, Zektar admitted. They haven't tried to communicate. They just appear, fight if attacked, disappear if they want to. Recommendations? Asked Counselor Thane. Zektar had been thinking about this for days. We need to learn more about their capabilities. Send a diplomatic mission, maybe. Try to understand what they've become. Diplomatic mission? Counselor Vex's tentacles writhed. To creatures who refuse to follow proper civilization. To beings who build ships like artists instead of engineers. They've survived 3,000 years alone, Zektar pointed out. They've built a civilization without our help, and their ships are defeating ours. Maybe we should try to understand how. Never, said Counselor Vex firmly. The Empire was built on order, on proper design, on everyone following the same rules. If we start accepting chaos, the Empire will fall apart. Other council members nodded in agreement, but Zektar noticed that a few looked thoughtful. A few seemed curious about these impossible ships. Very well, said Counselor Vex. Admiral, prepare our fleets. If humans want to return to civilized space, they will do so properly. They will follow our designs, our rules, our way of life, or they will not enter at all. And if they refuse, asked Zektar, then we will remind them why they were banished in the first place. The screen went dark. Zektar sat alone in his command center, looking at the recordings of human ships. Part of him was excited to see such strange, creative designs. Another part was terrified of what they might mean for the ordered galaxy he had served his entire life. His aide approached quietly.
Sir, what are your orders?
Zektar thought for a moment. Prepare the fleet. But also, start gathering all the old records about humans. Everything we have. I want to understand what we're really dealing with. Yes, sir. As his aide left, Zektar looked at the stars outside his window. Somewhere out there, millions of impossible ships flew through space. Ships built by the creativity and stubbornness that had gotten humans banished long ago. The question was, had 3,000 years made them stronger, or just more dangerous? He had a feeling he was about to find out. Captain Sarah Chen looked at her ship's main screen and smiled. 3 Imperial patrol ships hung in space ahead of her, their crystal-sharp hulls gleaming in the starlight. Beautiful ships. Perfect ships. Boring ships. Her own ship, the Defiant Improvisation, was none of those things. Captain, said her engineer Marcus from somewhere deep in the ship's belly. They're scanning us again. I think we're giving their computers headaches. Sarah laughed. She could understand why. Her ship had started life as a Zephyrian cruiser. That was 40 years ago. Since then, her crew had rebuilt it piece by piece. The engine section still glowed with Zephyrian blue energy, but human modifications made it twice as powerful. The middle section was armored with Thorian battle plates, painted bright red with yellow lightning bolts. The front was purely human design, a collection of sensors, weapons, and tools that could be rearranged depending on what they needed. Captain Chen, came a voice over the radio. The words were translated by her ship's computer, but she could hear the confusion in the alien speaker's tone. This is Commander Hextall of the Imperial Patrol Ship Pristine Order. Your vessel does not match any known design. Please identify yourself and submit to inspection. Sarah looked at her crew. There were 12 humans on board plus Korek, a friendly Mantarian who had joined them last year. Everyone was grinning. This should be fun, said Lieutenant Torres from the weapons station. Want me to show them our party tricks? Not yet, Sarah replied. She pressed the communication button. Commander Hextall, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant Improvisation. We're just passing through. A long pause. Then, United Earth ship? Earth was destroyed 3,000 years ago. And what is that object? You are flying? This object, Sarah said, patting her captain's chair fondly, is a perfectly good spaceship. A bit rough around the edges maybe, but she gets the job done. Through her main screen, she could see the Imperial ships moving into attack formation. Same pattern they had used for centuries. Same tactics. Same predictable moves. Captain Chen, Commander Hextall's voice was stern now. Your ship violates 17 different Imperial design codes. Report to our docking bay for immediate inspection and correction. Sarah's crew exchanged looks. Korek, their Mantarian friend, shook his head sadly. They really don't understand, do they? He said in his singing voice. Nope, Sarah agreed. Marcus, how are our systems looking? All green, Captain. Actually make that rainbow. We've got options. Sarah pressed the communication button again. Commander Hextall, I appreciate the offer, but we'll pass on the inspection. Have a nice day. She was about to close the channel when the Imperial commander's voice crackled back, angry now. Captain Chen, you will comply or face the consequences. Imperial law requires all ships to meet safety and design standards. And what if we don't? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Then you will be destroyed. Sarah sighed. It was always the same with the Empire. Follow the rules or die. No creativity. No flexibility. No fun. Torres, she said calmly. Show them what the defiant improvisation can do. What happened next made the Imperial commanders question everything they knew about ship design. First, the ugly human ship began to change. Sections of the hull rotated and shifted. What had looked like cargo containers unfolded into weapon platforms. The engine section split into 3 parts, giving the ship incredible maneuverability. In 60 seconds, the cargo hauler had become a heavy destroyer. The Imperial ships opened fire, their crystal weapons creating beautiful beams of deadly light. Sarah's ship danced between the attacks like it was performing a ballet. The modifications Marcus had made to the engines let them change direction in ways that should have liquefied the crew from the force. Comfortable artificial gravity is a wonderful thing, Sarah commented as her ship spun upside down and sideways at the same time. But the real surprise came when Torres opened fire. The weapons that emerged from the defiant improvisation were not just human designs. They were a mixture of technologies from a dozen different species, all working together in ways that defied Imperial engineering, principles a Zephyrian plasma cannon, combined with Thorian targeting systems and human-designed power boosters created a weapon that could punch through Imperial shields like they were paper. Mining lasers modified for combat could slice through hull armor in seconds. And when Torres activated the special surprise, even Sarah was impressed. What was that? She asked as one of the Imperial ships suddenly went dark. Remember those ion miners we salvaged last month? Torres grinned. I turned them into an electromagnetic pulse cannon. Their ships not destroyed, just completely disabled. The remaining 2 Imperial ships tried to retreat, but Sarah had other plans. Marcus, deploy the nets. Deploying fishing nets. Captain? What Marcus called fishing nets were actually modified tractor beam arrays built from salvaged mining equipment. Instead of one strong beam like Imperial ships used, the defiant improvisation could create dozens of smaller beams that worked together like a giant net. One of the Imperial ships found itself caught and unable to move. The other ship stopped retreating and demanded surrender. Commander Hextall, Sarah said into the radio, I think we need to talk. 20 minutes later, Commander Hextall and 2 of his officers were aboard the defiant improvisation. The Imperial commander was a tall, thin Thorian with silver scales and 3 eyes. Those eyes were wide with shock as Sarah's crew gave them a tour of the ship. This is impossible, he kept saying. These systems should not work together. The power requirements alone should overload your generators. Marcus, who was proudly showing off the engine room, just shrugged. We made some adjustments, added a few extra power cores here and there, rewired some things. You know, the usual. The usual? Commander Hextall's voice cracked. You have 17 different types of power cores running in parallel. The energy fluctuations should tear your ship apart. Yeah, we had that problem for a while, Marcus admitted. But then Janet and engineering figured out how to use the fluctuations to actually strengthen the hull. It's all about timing and resonance frequencies. Commander Hextall turned to Sarah. Captain Chen, where did you learn to build ships like this? Sarah thought about how to explain 3,000 years of human history. When your people kicked us out of the galaxy, we had to make do with what we could find. Broken ships, abandoned stations, leftover parts. We learned to make everything work with everything else. We had to, or we would have died. But this violates every principle of safe ship design. Does it? Sarah asked. We've been flying ships like this for 3,000 years. How many people have we lost to design failures? Commander Hextall looked confused. I don't know. Less than you'd think, Sarah told him. When you build something yourself, when you understand every bolt and wire, you take better care of it. When every ship is different, you learn to think on your feet. When you can't rely on standard procedures, you get creative. She led him to the main screen, where they could see his remaining ships. Your ships are beautiful, Commander, perfect. But they can only do what they were designed to do. Our ships can become whatever we need them to be. Commander Hextall was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, how many ships like this do humans have? Sarah smiled. Millions. And every single one is different. The Imperial commander's silver scales turned pale. Captain Chen, I need to contact my superiors immediately. Of course, Sarah agreed. But Commander, you might want to tell them that we're not the same humans who left 3,000 years ago. We've learned a few things since then. As the Imperial officers returned to their ship, Sarah's crew gathered on the bridge. They watched as the Imperial vessels limped away, their perfect hulls scarred by weapons they had never seen before. Think they'll be back? Asked Torres. Oh yes, Sarah said. But next time they'll bring bigger guns. Good, said Marcus from the engine room. I've been working on some new ideas. Admiral Zektar had seen many strange things in his long career, but nothing had prepared him for this. His reconnaissance fleet hung at the edge of human space, and what they found there challenged everything the Empire believed about civilization. Through the main screen of his flagship, Zektar watched a human city ship drift past. It was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, but that was where normal ended. The asteroid's surface was covered in gardens. Actual gardens, with trees and flowers visible from space. Docking ports jutted out at odd angles, each one different. Some glowed with different colored lights. Others had artwork painted on them. Massive murals that could be seen from thousands of miles away. Sir, said his science officer, a nervous Centauri named Veltar, I'm reading over 50,000 life forms on that one ship, and the power signatures. They're using at least 30 different types of engines. 30 different engines? Zektar could not believe it. On one ship? Yes, sir. And they're all working together somehow. Zektar watched as smaller human ships moved around the city ship like busy insects. No two ships looked the same. One was sleek and silver, clearly built for speed. Another was a huge, blocky cargo hauler with weapons bolted onto every surface. A third ship seemed to be made entirely of transparent materials, giving it the look of a flying crystal palace. Captain, came a voice over the radio. This is Commander Jackson of the human ship wandering home. Welcome to our space. Would you like a tour? The offer surprised Zektar. No weapons, no demands, no threats, just a friendly invitation. This is Admiral Zektar of the Imperial Fleet. We would be honored to accept your tour. 20 minutes later, Zektar and his senior officers were aboard a human shuttle that looked like it had been built from the parts of at least 5 different ships. Their guide was Commander Jackson, a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and bright blue eyes. First stop, she said cheerfully, is New Singapore Station. The station ahead of them made Zektar's head hurt just looking at it. It was clearly built from the remains of dozens of different ships. He could see sections from Thorian battleships, Zephyrian explorers, even what looked like pieces of ancient Imperial cruisers. But instead of looking like a junkyard, it looked artistic. How does it stay together? Asked Chief Engineer Vossonet, his rocky Thorian features showing deep confusion. Very carefully, Commander Jackson laughed. Actually, we've developed new welding techniques that let us join different hull materials. Plus, our structural engineers are pretty creative. They treat each station like a puzzle to solve. As they docked, Zektar saw humans working alongside dozens of different alien species. Most were refugees or outcasts from Imperial space, but they seemed happy. They worked together on ship modifications, trading techniques, and ideas. This is our main repair yard, Commander Jackson explained, as they walked through corridors that curved and twisted in impossible ways. We can fix anything here, we have to. We use ships from every species in the galaxy. They stopped at a viewing window that looked down into a massive hangar. Inside, Zektar saw something that made his breath catch. A young human was working on a ship's engine, but she was not alone. A Centauri engineer stood beside her, sharing tools and ideas. A Mantarian pilot offered suggestions about power flow. A Thorian welder showed her new techniques for joining different metals. They're working together, Zektar whispered. All different species, working as equals. Of course, Commander Jackson said, looking puzzled. How else would you do it? Everyone has different skills and knowledge. Why wouldn't you share? Engineer Vossonet pressed his face against the window. But their methods. They're using Thorian welding on Zephyrian hull plates. That should create stress fractures. It did at first, Commander Jackson agreed, but Maria down there figured out how to heat treat the joint to eliminate the stress. Now it's actually stronger than either material alone. They continued the tour, and each stop showed Zektar more impossible things. A human child, barely 10 years old, was programming a navigation computer using techniques from 6 different species. An elderly human man was teaching a group of young aliens how to modify engine cores for better efficiency. How do you learn all this? Zektar asked. We experiment, Commander Jackson said simply. We try things. Sometimes they don't work, so we try something else. Sometimes they work better than we expected. But without proper training? Without following established procedures? Commander Jackson stopped walking and looked at him seriously. Admiral, when we were exiled, we had no choice. We couldn't follow Imperial procedures because we weren't part of the Empire anymore. We had to learn everything from scratch. She led them to another viewing area. Outside, they could see human ships of every size and description. Some were clearly built for war, bristling with weapons and armor. Others were obviously exploration vessels, covered in sensors and scientific equipment. Still others seemed designed for pure comfort, with viewing decks and recreation areas. At first we just tried to copy what we remembered, she continued. But copied ships broke down. We didn't have the right materials or the right tools, so we started improvising. We learned to make Thorian armor work with Zephyrian engines. We figured out how to use Centauri computers to control Mantarian weapons. Engineer Vossinet was taking notes frantically. But the power requirements, the system incompatibilities. We solved them, Commander Jackson said with a shrug. Had to. It was solve them or die in the cold of space. Their final stop was the ship's main engineering section. Zektar had expected to see chaos, humans randomly bolting parts together without any plan. Instead, he found the most organized engineering bay he had ever seen. Humans worked at dozens of stations, each one focusing on a different aspect of ship design. One team was testing new hull materials. Another was working on engine efficiency. A third group was developing better weapon systems. But what impressed Zektar most was how they worked together. When one team had a problem, others immediately offered help. Knowledge was shared freely. New ideas were welcomed and tested quickly. This is our main research facility, Commander Jackson explained. We're constantly trying to improve our ships and systems. But you have no central authority, Zektar pointed out. No one telling you what designs to use. How do you maintain standards? We don't, Commander Jackson said, and Zektar could hear the pride in her voice. Every ship is unique. Every crew modifies their vessel to suit their needs. That's what makes us strong. Engineer Vossinet looked up from his notes. But without standards, how do you ensure compatibility? How do ships work together in fleets? A young human engineer overheard the question and laughed. That's the beauty of it. When you can adapt any system to work with any other system, compatibility is never a problem. We can form fleets from any ships we have available. As they prepared to return to their shuttle, Zektar asked the question that had been bothering him all day. Commander Jackson, what do humans want? Why are your ships moving toward Imperial space? The human woman looked surprised. Want? We don't want anything from the Empire. We're just curious. It's been 3,000 years since we've seen Imperial space. We wondered what you've been up to. Just curious? Of course. Aren't you curious about us? That's why you're here, isn't it? On the flight back to his flagship, Zektar sat in silence. His officers were busy discussing what they had seen, but he was thinking about something else. The Empire had 847 member species, but they all followed the same rules, used the same designs, thought the same thoughts. Humans had been alone for 3,000 years, and they had created something the Empire had never achieved. True cooperation between different species and ideas. Sir? His aide asked quietly. What should we report to the Council? Zektar looked out at the human ships drifting past. Each one was different. Each one was unique. Each one represented the creativity and determination of its builders. Tell them, he said slowly, that we have a lot to learn. Engineer Vossinet could not sleep. For 3 days since returning from human space, he had been staring at his notes and recordings. Everything he had seen challenged 50 years of engineering training. He sat in his workshop aboard the Imperial Research Station, surrounded by holographic displays showing human ship designs. Each one was impossible. Each one worked perfectly. "Computer," he said, "show me the human ship designated Synthesis again." The hologram appeared, and Vosnet's rocky Thorian features twisted in confusion. The ship looked like it had been built by committee. A committee that included members from 20 different species. The hull showed Thorian armor patterns but made from materials he did not recognize. The engines were clearly Zephyrian in design, but modified with components from at least 6 other technologies. Most disturbing of all, it worked. Not only did it work, but his analysis showed it was more efficient than any Imperial ship of similar size. "Engineer Vosnet," came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Dr. Kethra, a Centauri scientist from the research team. "Doctor, working late again?" "Like you, I cannot stop thinking about what we saw." She gestured to the hologram. "I have been running simulations for 3 days. According to our models, that ship should tear itself apart within hours. But it does not. No, it does not. In fact, it seems to get stronger the more stress it experiences." She joined him at the display controls. "Look at this section here. The humans have created a joint between Thorian battle steel and Zephyrian crystal matrix." Vosnet nodded. "Impossible materials to combine. Different expansion rates, different molecular structures. Any engineer knows you cannot weld them together. But they did, and look at the result." Dr. Kethra highlighted a section of the hull. "The joint is actually stronger than either material alone. The stress from their different properties creates a resonance effect that reinforces the entire structure." They stared at the data in silence. Vosnet's entire education told him this was wrong, but the evidence was right in front of him. "Doctor," he said slowly, "what if our engineering principles are incomplete?" Before she could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as the station's communication system activated. "All senior staff report to the main conference room immediately," came the announcement. Vosnet and Dr. Kethra hurried through the corridors, joining streams of Imperial scientists and engineers. The conference room was packed when they arrived. On the main screen, they could see the concerned face of Admiral Zektar. "Colleagues," the Admiral began, "I am calling this emergency session because of reports reaching us from across the Empire. It seems word of human ship designs has spread and the reaction is unexpected." The screen changed to show star charts marked with colored indicators. Red dots showed Imperial shipyards. Blue dots showed areas of unusual activity. "In the past week," Admiral Zektar continued, 17 different Imperial shipyards have reported unauthorized modification attempts. Centauri engineers are trying to reverse engineer human adaptive systems. Thorian shipwrights are experimenting with mixed material construction. Even the Zephyrians are questioning their traditional engine designs." A murmur ran through the crowd. Modification without authorization was almost unheard of in Imperial space. "More troubling," the Admiral went on. "Several member species have formally requested permission to study human engineering methods. The Arcturians want to send a research mission. The Mantarians are asking for copies of our technical reports. Even some humans within Imperial space, descendants of those who stayed behind 3,000 years ago, are asking questions about their heritage." Dr. Kethra leaned toward Vosnet. "This is what I was afraid of," she whispered. The screen changed again, this time showing footage from an Imperial shipyard. Vosnet gasped as he watched Thorian workers attempting to modify a standard cruiser design. They were trying to add modular weapon systems like the ones they had seen on human ships. "The modifications failed, of course," Admiral Zektar said, "but the attempt shows how deeply this human influence is spreading." A voice from the back of the room called out, "Admiral, has the Emperor issued any guidance on this situation?" The Admiral's expression grew serious. "Emperor Thalox has called for an emergency session of the Grand Assembly. All member species are sending representatives. The topic is what they are calling the human problem." Vosnet felt his heart sink. He had hoped the Empire would be curious about human innovations. Instead, it seemed they were being treated as a threat. 3 days later, Vosnet found himself aboard a transport ship heading for the Imperial capital. As one of the few engineers who had actually seen human ships in person, he had been ordered to attend the Grand Assembly as a technical advisor. The journey gave him time to think. He had spent those 3 days reviewing his notes and running more simulations. Each analysis confirmed what he was beginning to suspect. Human engineering was not just different from Imperial methods, it was better. The Imperial capital was a sight that normally filled Vossinet with pride. 1,000-year-old buildings stretched toward the sky, each one perfectly designed and maintained. The orbital shipyards produced vessels of flawless beauty and function. Everything was ordered, efficient, and eternal. But now, as he looked at the identical ships in formation around the planet, Vossinet found himself thinking about the chaotic diversity of human space. The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest room Vossinet had ever seen. Representatives from 847 species filled floating platforms arranged in perfect geometric patterns. At the center, Emperor Thalox rose to address the gathering. The Emperor was ancient even by Imperial standards. His crystalline form had ruled the Empire for over 2,000 years. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Fellow citizens of the Empire," he began, "we face a crisis unlike any in our history. For 3,000 years, our civilization has thrived through order, through standardization, through the wisdom of proven designs. Now, creatures we thought extinct threaten to undo everything we have built." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. But Vossinet noticed that not all species were nodding. Some representatives looked thoughtful, even curious. "The so-called humans," Emperor Thalox continued, "spread chaos wherever they go. Their ship designs violate every principle of safe engineering. Their methods threaten the stability that has kept our empire peaceful for millennia." Emperor Thalox gestured, and holographic displays showed recordings of human ships. To Vosnet's surprise, the Emperor focused on the most unusual examples, ships that looked the most alien and threatening. "Look at these abominations," the Emperor declared. "Ships that change shape during flight. Weapon systems cobbled together from incompatible technologies. Hull materials that should not exist. This is not progress, this is madness." But then something unexpected happened. Councillor Yen of the Centauri delegation stood up. "Your Majesty," she said respectfully, "with permission, I would like to hear from the engineers who actually studied these ships." Emperor Thalox's crystalline form shimmered with annoyance. "Councillor Yen, the technical reports have been distributed to all delegations." "Yes, Your Majesty. But I would like to hear Engineer Vosnet's personal observations." All eyes turned to Vosnet. He felt his rocky skin growing warm under the attention of nearly 1,000 alien representatives. But Dr. Kethra had encouraged him to speak the truth. "Whatever the consequences, Your Majesty," he began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "the human ships are indeed unlike anything in Imperial design." Nods of agreement from around the chamber. Emperor Thalox looked satisfied. "However," Vossinet continued, and the chamber fell silent, "they are also remarkably effective. In many ways they are superior to our current designs." The silence stretched for long moments. Then the chamber erupted in voices, some angry, some curious, some confused. Emperor Thalox raised a crystalline hand for silence. "Engineer Vossinet, you seem to be suggesting that chaos is preferable to order." "No, Your Majesty. I am suggesting that there might be more than one kind of order." Vossnet's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Human ships are not chaotic. They are adaptive. Every modification serves a purpose. Every unusual design solves a specific problem. And what problems do our ships not solve?" the Emperor asked coldly. Vossinet thought about the human engineering bay, the cooperation between species, the constant innovation and improvement. "Our ships solve the problems they were designed to solve, but human ships can solve new problems as they arise." The chamber began buzzing with conversation again, but this time Vossinet heard more curiosity than anger in the voices. Councillor Yen spoke again. "Engineer Vossinet, in your professional opinion, could Imperial shipbuilding benefit from studying human methods?" It was the question Vossinet had been hoping for and dreading. His answer would either end his career or change the Empire forever. "Yes," he said simply. "I believe it could." Emperor Thalox's form blazed with angry light. But before he could respond, other voices rose from the assembly. Questions, suggestions, demands for more information. The careful order of the chamber began to break down as representatives called out to each other across the vast space. For the first time in Imperial history, the Grand Assembly was Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new ship. watching the largest fleet in Imperial history assemble at the Nexus Gate. 10,000 Imperial vessels hung in perfect formation, their crystal hulls glinting like stars. Each ship was identical to others of its class. Each one followed patterns that had not changed in 1,000 years. "Magnificent," said Admiral Zektar, who stood beside her. The Thorian officer had requested permission to observe the coming battle from a human ship, much to the anger of his superiors. "Beautiful," Sarah agreed. "And completely predictable." Her ship, the Synthesis, was a masterpiece of human engineering. Built over the past 6 months specifically for this moment, it represented everything humans had learned about adaptive design. Parts of it had been contributed by 47 different species, including several Imperial member races who had secretly shared their technologies. The ship's hull seemed to shimmer and shift as Sarah watched. Panels adjusted themselves automatically to changing conditions. Weapon systems folded and unfolded as the ship's computer anticipated possible threats. Even the bridge was modular, with stations that could be reconfigured in minutes. "Captain," came Marcus's voice from the engineering section. "All systems show green. Actually, all systems show about 12 different colors, but they all mean good things." Sarah smiled. Even after 30 years, Marcus had not lost his sense of humor about their unconventional technology. "Human fleet status?" she asked. 412 ships ready for action," reported Lieutenant Torres from her tactical station. "Each one unique, each one ready to surprise our Imperial friends." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing both fleets. The numbers were clearly against them. 10,000 Imperial ships versus 400 human vessels. In any normal battle, the outcome would be certain, but this was not going to be a normal battle. "Incoming transmission from the Imperial flagship," Torres announced. The main screen flickered to show Emperor Thalox himself. The ancient crystalline being's form pulsed with cold light as he spoke. "Captain Chen, I am Emperor Thalox of the Galactic Empire. You and your people have caused enough disruption. Submit to Imperial authority, accept standard ship designs and protocols, or face the consequences." Sarah had expected this. The Empire always offered the same choice: conform or die. "Emperor Thalox," she replied calmly. "With respect, we choose a third option." "There is no third option." "There is now," Sarah said. "We choose to show you what human engineering can really do." The Emperor's crystalline form blazed brighter. "You have 400 ships against 10,000. Your defiance is admirable but pointless." "Numbers aren't everything," Sarah replied. "Admiral Zektar, would you like to explain to your Emperor what makes human ships different?" Admiral Zektar stepped forward, his scaled features showing determination despite the obvious risk to his career. "Your Majesty, human ships are not just vessels. They are constantly evolving tools. Each one can adapt to any situation, perform multiple roles, and work together in ways our doctrine has never considered." "Adaptation is chaos," Emperor Thalox stated firmly. "Order is strength." "Then let us show you what chaos can accomplish," Sarah said. She nodded to Torres, who activated the demonstration they had prepared. Across the human fleet, ships began to change. The Imperial crews watched in amazement as human vessels transformed before their eyes. Cargo ships unfolded weapon systems and became destroyers. Small fighters linked together to form larger vessels. Even tiny scout ships revealed hidden capabilities, extending sensor arrays that turned them into early warning platforms. But the real surprise was the Synthesis itself. As Emperor Thalox watched, Sarah's ship began to split apart. Sections separated and reconfigured, turning one large vessel into 5 smaller ones, each specialized for a different role. "Impossible," whispered the Emperor. "Very possible," Sarah replied from the command ship, one of the 5 sections. "This is what happens when you don't limit yourself to fixed designs." Emperor Thalox's voice turned cold with rage. "Destroy them. All ships open fire." The Imperial fleet attacked with overwhelming force. Thousands of energy beams and missile volleys filled space with deadly light. It should have been the end of the human fleet. Instead, it was the beginning of the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Human ships moved like no Imperial vessel could. They danced between attacks, changed direction in impossible ways, and adapted their defenses in real time. Ships that took damage immediately began repairing themselves, using built-in fabrication systems to replace damaged components. But the humans did more than just survive the attack. They began to demonstrate capabilities that made Emperor Thalox question everything he knew about space combat. A human destroyer split into 4 pieces to avoid a missile barrage, then reassembled seconds later to return fire. A converted cargo ship extended mechanical arms to literally grab Imperial fighters and disable them with precise cuts to their engine systems. 2 human vessels docked together mid-battle, sharing weapons and power systems to become a temporary heavy cruiser. How? Emperor Thalox demanded over the communication channel. Practice, Sarah replied as her command section linked up with a weapons platform, doubling her firepower instantly. 3,000 years of making do with whatever we could find. We learned to make every ship into a toolkit instead of just a tool. The turning point came when the human fleet demonstrated their most advanced capability. Instead of fighting as individual ships, they began to coordinate in ways that created entirely new tactical possibilities. Ships shared targeting data in real time, allowing them to focus fire with devastating precision. Damaged vessels transferred their crews and critical systems to healthy ships, then used their hulks as improvised weapons or shields. Some ships even exchanged major components during battle, with engineering crews performing modifications while under fire. The Imperial fleet, trained to fight according to rigid procedures, could not adapt to these constantly changing tactics. Commanders found themselves facing enemies that behaved differently every few minutes. "Your Majesty," Admiral Zektar said urgently over a private channel, "we need to call for a ceasefire. We're losing ships for no reason." "Never," Emperor Thalox replied. "Order must be maintained." But even as he spoke, reports flooded in from across the Imperial fleet. Ships were suffering critical system failures as their crews tried to copy human tactics without proper training. Attempts to modify weapons and defenses during a battle were backfiring catastrophically. It was then that Sarah played her final card. "All human ships," she broadcast, on an open channel that the entire Imperial fleet could hear. "Activate protocol synthesis." What happened next would be remembered as the moment that changed galactic civilization forever. Every human ship in the fleet began broadcasting technical specifications. Not just their own designs, but improvements, modifications, and innovations they had developed. They shared everything: weapon upgrades, defensive systems, engine modifications, even basic ship maintenance techniques. More importantly, they broadcast these specifications in formats that any species could understand and use. Across the Imperial fleet, engineering crews began receiving detailed instructions on how to improve their own ships. Young officers who had grown up questioning rigid Imperial doctrine saw possibilities they had never imagined. "What are you doing?" Emperor Thalox demanded. "Sharing," Sarah replied simply. "It's what we do." The battle effectively ended as Imperial ships began standing down, not because they were defeated, but because their crews were too busy studying the human technical data to continue fighting. Emperor Thalox found himself alone in his determination to continue the battle. One by one, his fleet commanders reported that their crews were requesting permission to study human modifications. "This is treason," the Emperor declared. "This is evolution," Admiral Zektar replied. And then, in an act that shocked both fleets, he formally resigned his Imperial commission and requested asylum with the human fleet. He was not the last. Over the following hours, ships began leaving the Imperial formation. Some came to study human technology. Others came to join the growing movement for technological freedom. Emperor Thalox, faced with the collapse of his fleet and the rebellion of his own officers, finally understood that he had lost more than a battle. He had lost the future. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on the Imperial capital. But it was no longer called the Imperial capital. The new Galactic Confederation had no single ruler, no rigid hierarchy. Instead, representatives from hundreds of species worked together to share knowledge and resources. Human engineers taught alien crews how to modify their ships. Alien scientists shared discoveries with human researchers. The old boundaries between species and technologies were disappearing. "Captain Chen," said former Admiral Zektar, who now served as the Confederation's first Minister of Technological Cooperation, "the first joint human-alien ship designs are ready for testing." Sarah looked at the holographic displays showing the new vessels. They were beautiful in ways that Imperial ships had never been. Each one was unique, incorporating the best ideas from dozens of different species. They were ships built not for war or rigid utility, but for exploration.